Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Inspiration from the inner realms. Where to begin? Human beings are action-oriented creatures. Their action is based on the data they receive. The data they receive is based on how they are aware, how much they are aware of their receptive mechanism, the kind of receiver they are. Hello, Idris. Welcome. The inspiration from one's inner realms, the awareness to self, the self that is dependent on the environment that is going to be that will change in accordance to the expression of the self. It's kind of like I find true mysticism develops a relationship with the movement of one's experience and the movement of the experience of the world. And what that means is we are occurring in the same moment as nature is occurring. Therefore, the inspiration is as individual as it needs to be until it suddenly taps into a collective pattern. When it taps into the collective pattern, because it's not justified by identity, it trusts the moment. This is, I find, the true core of mystical practice, to take one out of the thought of self, to realize that the world moves and maneuvers through various thoughts. It's a game between shapeless moments and shaped moments. The shaped moments are more in our free will and control due to pattern recognition, identification of past structures. And the shapeless attributes, the shapeless movements, they are ones where they require an alphabet. So this is a very unique concept. Just like how we have symbols, you can say a person uses the alphabet, uses language, uses their vocabulary in some sense. So similarly, it's as if think of every thought in your mind ever, including memories, whatever. This to be a sort of alphabet. So there have been moments where I've been subtle and aware of thought and how it's been moving, and it hasn't been just like somebody throwing something at me. It's like, here, have this thought, and like somebody throws you a thought. It has been more of a kind of experiential shift. Something new was happening to the experience that brought forth the new emergence of the thought is acceptable. You know, it's you have to follow your excitement in this life, or there will be many moments you will not trust. And what I'm saying is that my full realization is that there's a component to our intelligence which is field like. That means imagine all my memories, all my visualizations, all my ideology, everything that this mind has ever fathomed. It's in a field. It's as if like I have thrown a bunch of ice in a swimming pool and I'm looking at the ice. Do you know? the nature of the ice in the swimming pool, they change. There are certain moments that a person can get certain thoughts on themselves, certain harsh thoughts on themselves, and then their attention could simply steer into another moment, and that same emotion resonates. It's like the person hates one thing, then he's like, oh man, I hate everything. It's like, of course, because in that moment, hate has been the Trojan horse that has entered your mind. You see, this is something I didn't understand. People take care of their body, people take care of their environment, their space where they're living, but very few people take care of the mind by checking up on it. That means you have to be inspired to go to do your own reality check. This reality check can only be found if there is an independence, a sort of separation from how the world was told to be in the past. Nice. Thanks, Ed, for letting me know. This is one thing that I have experienced a lot. Like really in this lifetime of mine, I have experienced a lot, and it's as if like I have experienced my mind becoming the shape of what appears as a collective movement. And a collective movement is non-local. You know what that means? That is the power of an idea. Victor Hugo, this European writer, he has this thing where he says, nothing is more powerful than an idea in which its time has come. What does that mean? That means an idea that is the accurate reflection of reality. We are not just standing on earth. We're not just standing on an elemental reality. As I'm speaking, if you're understanding anything from what I'm saying, you are standing in your subjective realms. The subjective realm can change. It's as if like the concept is the objective being, the context is the subjective being. This is why you look at stuff and suddenly they have a meaning. How do they have a meaning? Because behind your eyes, worlds are being entertained. It's kind of like you can say I've had certain moments like in the movie Gladiator. There's a scene where Maximus is like he's defeated. He's kind of given the crowd what they've wanted, and then he's shouting, "Are you not entertained?" He says, "Are you not entertained?" And there's been moments where I've had certain subjective experiences and I've been aware of it, and I've kind of looked at the sky, and I've been like playfully, my mind shouted, "Are you not entertained?" Like, and what I mean by that is that it's all about sensitivity to attention. We are creatures of attention before we are creatures of thought. Once you understand your attention, you understand yourself. That is the key. So now, for me, a lot of inspiration has occurred through writing. I have, believe it or not, before I gave these talks, the pen was my voice. The pen was my mouth. I, in some sense, spoke through the pen, through writing. And that writing was more of a kind of journaling my own search. I find true genius, the genius of the ancient polymaths, only arises from an honest question that has never been attempted. It's kind of like Christopher Columbus. When he found that new place, he was like, holy shit, I did it. He had inspiration. His inspiration solidified. It is true. I 100%, I agree that there is two types of inspiration. There is inspiration that comes from a self in a world, and there is an inspiration that comes from the world in the self. It's kind of like a chess game for the mystic. The mystic lets the world move first, and then it moves. That is the whole point of wisdom. Wisdom has patience that allows it to see the depth of something more. That is the value of patience, by the way. When I was younger, it's as if this is how you know someone is a true victor, a person who is a true winner, is that the winning and losing were not as important as where the whole thing was going. So it's a sort of preferenceless state I'm trying to suggest. In 2000, I think it was around 2000, in the middle of like 2012 to 13, where I had a dream. Not like a Martin Luther King dream, like an actual dream. We're in the dream, and this is very personal, but I'll share it because we don't know how long we're here. I find myself in this semi kind of sleep paralysis way where I'm aware of my body. It's as if my mind is awoken earlier than me. Now, anybody who knows what sleep paralysis is, there's an earthly explanation, and then there's a heavenly explanation. The earthly explanation is that your body produces this chemical so that when you dream, like if you dream of running, your body doesn't run in your bed. So sometimes sleep paralysis is how the mind has become alert, has become conscious, but the body still has that chemical in it, so it feels really heavy to move your body, and you feel like something's sitting on you. I've never felt like something's sitting on me, but I've always wondered about the simultaneity of the presence of a multidimensional domain. That means I don't give it image. For me, image is not a justification of truth. Image is just a reflection of truth. There are so many truths that are inconceivable. It's beyond the language threshold. It's like, I want you to imagine like an Amazonian tribe back in the day. Our civilization, in consideration to the forests of the mind unexplored, is we are a little tribe. We are occupying a little part of the world and trying to extract as much meaning from it, only to realize that there is more beyond the fence of our vision. And this is why it's kind of like, this was my attempt, because I had this feeling that I'll tell you more about my dream, but I got to say this. We need pilots, guys. We need pilots. We need people who care about the questions that are being forgotten by the future generations. Our task is no longer to give answers. It's done. No, we are too sophisticated as creatures to be satisfied with external answers. But still, internal questions. That means like, this was kind of Galileo's way of teaching. I'll get back to my dream. Don't worry. But I'm saying, like, Galileo had this thing where he said, you can't teach anyone anything. You can only make them realize it within themselves. What does that mean? You can't teach anyone anything. Nobody has your eyes. No one will ever see what you see exactly in the same way. That is just the law of nature. We're each given our own mountain to stand on. But the thing is that by asking a question, the reality has to look at itself. And seldom is this said, but questions are the liberators. Answers are the enslavers. Man does not need an answer. There is no instruction book. There is no sentence that can fulfill the duty of the lifetime. What that means is be playful with language, as if you are the elder of language. Hey Ed, is this better? To be honest, when I sometimes speak, my head moves back and forth, kind of like my hands are moving as well. So there could be a chance that it goes on and off. So I think this should be better. I brought the whole thing closer. Any more closer, my mouth would be hitting my keyboard. So hopefully this is good. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that you cannot teach anyone anything. What does that mean? That means if you are seeking any truth, you have to dare to go at it alone. That's the first thing. You're not a scholar until you're asking your own questions. You're not even a human being unless you ask your own questions. You're pretty much the hamster wheel of the language you have been exposed to. Language can be cruel by limiting the more, kind of like hiding that there is more to this phenomenon that we are. So anyways, in my dream, I have this sort of sleep paralysis. The heavenly explanation is that pretty much, yeah, your mind doesn't sleep, your body does. So when your mind just becomes conscious, it's just there. So anyways, I had this experience where I'm in my bed. I can't move my body. It's as if my body is asleep, but I'm aware of the room. right? And I'm in my body. And then I hear this, I'll never forget it. It was the first time in my life I had heard a word in my dream that I knew instantly the exact spelling of, but I did not know the definition. So I remember I heard a word I had never heard in my life, or maybe subconsciously I had heard and never understood. But it was this word came in the dream as I'm in this sleep paralysis in my bed. This happened in mid 2012, getting close to 13 actually. And what happened is I say this word. The word was Lida, Li space Dah. And it's one of those mysteries of my lifetime. It's as if until I know I'll stick around until I truly comprehend what that word means. As a being, I mean, as an incarnate being. But the whole idea was that in that moment, in that dream, I'll never forget it. I say that word. The word instantly comes in my ear, and it's as if it didn't come from the room. It wasn't like something whispered it to me. It wasn't a relationship with another being. It was a sort of incredible solitude in a conscious state, semi-conscious state. And in that conscious state, there came when I said that word, it was an instant projection. I remember it was like an instant. I feel like I get pushed, like literally like catapulted from my body in an instant. Right in that dream, when I say the word Lida, and when it happens, when I say that word, it's suddenly it's so strange. It's like an instant catapult and then coming back down. But in that instant, I saw images that I knew weren't limited to time. What does that mean? That means not everything you see has to be in a linear space and time. I see a projection. In that projection, I see a giant wall in space with an inverted triangular cave. That was the moment where my unconscious communicated a geometrical expression. I was just hovering in front of this giant inverted triangular cave in space and a giant wall, and there was this sense of restriction, but not a sense of unfamiliarity. It's as if it was as if a garden is a forbidden garden that you cannot enter. So that giant inverted triangular cave in the middle of space in that dream, I see that. I also see something else, which I'll keep that for later. But anyways, I return. I return to my bed, and I'll never forget the ceiling was like liquid and it was cubic. So imagine like the ceiling divided into kind of like squares, but it's waving what do you call it, like the surface of the surface of water. It was a very strange kind of cubic liquid kind of experience of the ceiling of my room. And then I'm in my body, and the instant I'm in my body, I just it's like literally I just stand up and I'm sitting on the side of my bed, conscious of all of this that has happened, remembering the word, and astonished and shocked. And it was like 6 a.m. I was just sitting by the side of my bed, and my hands were on my forehead, and I was trying to contemplate like, excuse my language, but it was like a what the fuck moment, for my, like, how the unconscious has communicated to me. And there was a sort of cleanness. I don't know how to tell you. It was as if my soul took a shower. It was very strange. It was the unconscious was communicating to me, and I'm just happy I was able to acknowledge it. The unconscious communicates to everyone. It's just so many people don't care about it because their future is in a sort of linear projection in their minds. Because they want a certain future, they can never see what life planned for them. Do you know? Life has many plans. And we are the implementation of nature's intelligence in its next greater expressive form. So that's with the dream. Guys, I'm going to pay attention to the chat. So Idris, you're saying, let me just read this. Ah, I know why. I know why he did that. Language is so malleable that it makes me afraid that way I can stand at any side. No, no, let me tell you why. Let me tell you why it happened. It's the same thing. It's like I remember somebody telling me this story of Alan Watts, this very profound liberated speaker at the end of his life, kind of reaching a sort of madness and chaos and doing things that are reckless, right? Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. Because it is there's archetypes. It's strange, but you should touch the unknown without hands. If you understand that, then I feel you're good. But if you touch the unknown with hands, that means it's like you're not aware of the space. Okay, let me say it like this. Let me tell you what happens when you realize, when you step out of the linguistic simulation. You understand the subjective realm can be said in any way. That gives you a huge responsibility. That gives you a huge responsibility. And if the person feels their emotions, there is an ego still, emotional ego, a sort of emotion that the attention is idolizing. The mixture of personal emotions with the freedom, with the recognition of the freedom of the subjective realm, it becomes too powerful. You know why? Because the guy's mind searches for a story. Do you know it's very few people who can live on this planet without a story? Do you know how many times it was just, this is what I mean, that I have been fighting language since my childhood, Idris. This is what I mean. That it's like, think of it this way. A person is standing, this child in this world is standing, and there's other people standing. But now also imagine there's thoughts standing. And thoughts, they have to find an attention or they will be forgotten. A lot of things that come to the person, they may not care. Do you know? Like I'll give you an example. For example, you're sitting in nature and a bird comes and sits on a branch of this kind of bush right beside you. Now, people will not care. It's like, okay, a bird is sitting here. But some people suddenly look at the bird and after a while realize the bird flies somewhere else and goes and stands there. And they suddenly get this feeling, okay, let me follow this bird. They walk and they suddenly see that the moment they walk, they just trusted that intuition, that moment where it had a value even though it didn't have a story. Let me tell you the chaos of man. Our minds are not ready to be storyless. Because then it means there is no purpose for the ego, and the ego is a development. It took us 4 billion years to get egos. We can't just be like, okay, forget the ego or declare war on the ego. We're actually, any war that the mind declares, it's a fight against self. So here's the thing. I feel that there's a Zen story that explains this. He didn't quit. I don't believe he quit. He was taken somewhere else. You see, it's like if you have an ability in this life, life will use it. Let me tell you this. There's this interesting Zen story, Idris. I will tell you. It's in this Zen story. There's this very like kind of this man who's getting insights. This practitioner, Zen practitioner. Let me tell you, Idris, the guy that kind of quit his thing is he felt he was in a divine position. He got the intuitive teaching of not touching, the untouchable. You can't touch the untouchable. When you can't touch the untouchable, you feel guilty communicating structure. So what that means is imagine somebody who steps out of the language threshold, the linguistic simulation. They're a creature that doesn't have to be in a story, but still it's as if like, it's so hard. You have to hold on to something in the material realm if you want to stick around. So I feel that yes, so language is magic. Language is being able to write a new world instantly. And if the person emotionally feels they don't deserve they will leave the space. I've done this too many times. Many times I've gotten into somewhere and I'm like, is the moment going to bring up, like open a deep discussion? And then no, it was as if my whole inner realm, the logos it's as if the logos commanded me, don't say a single word, just be silent and watch. Right? So it was a moment like that. Anyways, with the Zen story, there's this Zen practitioner. He gets deep insights, and people come and ask him and talk to him, and he gives a lot of he shares a lot of wisdom or whatever. And then people are like, "Oh my God, man, you're great. You should be our teacher. We'll all be your disciples." So in the Zen story, this one guy who's just trusting life and going forward suddenly is asked by all the people in the community, be our teacher, something like that. It's a Zen story, by the way, guys. Back in the day, people were more desperate. So what happened? So what happens is that the guy says, "Oh my God, this is a sign from life. People are asking me to do this. I mean, like, this is pretty much life asking me to do this. Maybe I should do this." And the guy says, "Okay." And suddenly that day comes where he's sitting on that special chair and the whole townspeople are there. And then one person comes and asks a question that starts with why. Why? WHY. The person's like, "Why this?" Like master or something. And the guy, this Zen practitioner, gets a cold sweat on the back of his head. And he realizes he doesn't know. He feels, at least he's honest and wise enough to be honest with himself. You know? And so he realizes he doesn't know. And he immediately takes off the hat and gets off that special chair and says, "I am no longer your teacher." And he leaves for 2 years. And after 2 years, he comes back with a different glow in his eyes, because the person was not certain of reality, because the person had not heard the voice of the unknown truly and experientially. This means the person can get enlightened, but the difference between the Bodhisattva and the Buddha is that the Buddha is just getting out of the simulation. The Bodhisattva has been out of the simulation and now is going in it with an intent. Just like how some people are in places where they have no idea why they're there, and there's some people who are like, "I know why I'm here." It's like it's like their heart has a vision. They are here. They're not in this life to just have fun. They're here to work. They are working souls, helping to bridge all this segmented and fragmented archetypes into the collective vision. So pretty much every person alive in 2019, your task is to help build the next great narrative that is going to inspire the civilization, an ethos that is not avoiding the unconscious. That is pretty much the challenge, I think, as human beings. Like, that's what we have to do. It's like, it's not about just a physical game. It's like matter has blinded us to what else there could be. And language is the extension of inner meaning of matter. Let me tell you, if when he understood Idris, I feel that he was not an individual. And it's very hard. It's his compassion, Idris. Let me tell you, it was his compassion. I know the feeling that guy had. It's the I've said it in a story too. Do you remember that story I told you of the person who sees all right, guys, I gotta say the story. Three Sufi friends, they're at the edge of town. Surprisingly, there's a giant wall there that has never been there before. They see this ladder. One of them climbs up, goes to the top of the wall, this giant wall, and sees on the other side is a heavenly dimension, is the garden of paradise, is the completion of lifetimes. And so the first friend who goes up the ladder, he jumps in. The second friend, he's like, "Oh my God, the garden of paradise." He jumps in. The second friend's like, "Whoa, where'd the first friend go?" And the second friend goes up the ladder and gets to the top of the wall. The second friend says, "Oh my God, the garden of paradise." He sees why the first friend just ran in. And before he jumps, he's like, okay, let me at least say it to the third friend. He looks at the third friend and says, yo, man, Garden of Heavens, like Garden of Paradise is up here. I'm jumping into, and he jumps. The third friend remains. These three friends are guys' metaphors. They're phases of the mystical evolution, a subjective evolution. And so anyways, what happens is that the third friend goes up. He climbs. He climbs and reaches the top and sees it is true. It is actually the Garden of Paradise. It is heaven. And in that moment, his conscious and all the voices granted existence in his mind are shouting at him, saying, jump, jump. Your life is there. It's like, this is it. Jump. It's a moment of ultimate, you let go of the world by becoming it. It's weird. So in that moment, instead of jumping in, instead of listening to the voice of the angels of his past, he cannot jump. And he climbs down. And he says, the Garden of Paradise is here. The world should know. Do you see? He has come, that being's energetic existence is pushed with a certain intent. As if the seed has been planted in the soil intentionally, not just randomly thrown. That intention manifests as how the energy moves. Eventually, Idris, there will, at least the way I've kind of been introduced to it in the Upanishads, there will be no difference between the waking state, the dream state, and the deep sleep state, because they're all present through the fourth witnessing state. The witness is not attributeless, so it will always be just a changeless observance of change. The contentment with that changeless observance of change leads to karmic healing, because you're being natural. You realize that's the meaning of life. It took us 4 billion years to evolve and to be this, and now we're struggling to be this. How's that even possible? Man is what he is. It's no longer about just claiming external freedom through certain algorithms of behavior. That is not what society should be for. Society, capitalism is holding on to a very important value, that of the free market. And so similarly, it's people wonder about a free market of ideology, how language lives on the surface of this earth in our minds in every moment that we're conscious and attention, the flame of attention flickers. It's also establishing something where this is honestly, I think it's probably like it's a bit odd thing to say, but if I ask you, could silence also be man's voice? I'm curious for how many people are listening here feel that silence can also be a voice, or silence is something that it's not just hollow, it's not just absence of sound. It is where sound enters the manifest realm from. It's a gate. Silence is a portal. Stillness is a portal. These are ways that the state of mind brings itself into its conscious control. And anytime, any person, I feel like this is the only way that problems ever get handled and solved. There is this endless effort of looking at it again. Looking at it again, looking at it again. Eventually you're like, who's looking at this again? And your enlightenment comes in the mail, You know what the issue is? People don't realize, as much as there is a total freedom for their life to be inefficient, there is also a total freedom for the life to be efficient. At first, you have to find a story that activates, that gives your ego, that lets your ego win. What does that mean? That means the ego should not be killed. The subjective self shouldn't be touched, to be honest. That means to not have an opinion on yourself is a pretty, like, you know, nirvikalpa samadhi state. We are creatures of experience, but in order to have the experience have a value, the experience has to be, this change has to find itself in a container. The character we find ourselves to be in this world is the contained response to attention endlessly changing. I've had this incredible experience, especially when I write. It's as if it's like I experience, believe it or not, like a climate behind my eyes. True poets are writing with one foot, in reality, and one foot in the imagined realms, in their subtler planes of abstraction. What does that mean? That means regardless of how much I communicate, there are various ways that the mind is articulating the moment. It's like I'm just privileged by just sharing these talks to give a voice to the inner dimensions of my being. But to be honest, what it is it's a call to action. But this action, believe it or not, is an attention to attention, as if somebody for the first time is saying, hey man, pay attention to your attention. What is the driving force of existential vision? This is when language, it's like for the weak being, language is cruel. But for the pilot, language is just a domain of navigation. That means what's really going on is that energy is expressing itself in more sophisticated ways, but its sophistication has come into its conscious control. So for the first time, a part of nature can reinterpret the nature. Like, think about it, guys. It's about solitude. It's about from zero going into one, going into two, and then infinity and beyond. Beyond the dualistic dimension, it's infinite. That means it doesn't matter if you're in the seventh dimension or, the 7,000th dimension or whatever. It's like beyond the number two. It's like infinity is the younger brother of duality. That means it will always listen to duality. Inspiration finds you when you stop obsessing over it and actually attend to your life, to your moment of being. First thing is that before wanting to be somewhere else or something else, look at what you've got. I kind of see it doesn't matter really what sort of garb of language we wear, what kind of ideas, what we identify with. We're understanding this even through the political climate of having the modern wave of political correctness and the kind of shadows of feminism kind of marching through. So what does that mean? That means we are fighting with each other while be fighting with the unknown. Right? There is one thing we have in common, me and you, and it's not that what we know, it's not what we agree with. I personally believe no two people can ever agree on anything. They can just agree to certain percentages of it and keep building. There can never be full agreement. It's like only if we were clones we could agree to something, you know. So what does that mean? That means there is we are entertaining, it's like a compassionate person, their imagination is much more open because they're in a state of giving. I'm not joking. Just one day do the opposite of everything you're doing and study the karmic result. The mind is a Rubik's cube that needs to be solved by the self. Your self is everything. And your self is also temporary. The body is temporary. As the sooner you acknowledge this, then life can breathe easily again. That means we are not here. I hope I have failed in these talks if I have made people feel that there is an eternity that there is nothing to like do about. Like I am telling you, I have failed if you still are worshiping language. Your experience has a voice. It's the secret language of the conscious attention navigating in space and time. You're not just in space and time, you are conceiving space and time. What does that mean? That means words are worlds of their own and we are the watchers beyond. Silence is how God's heartbeat is allowing God's mind to be a conception. It's like asking yourself, what is the power source? What is fueling my belief system? And it tends to be two things, fear or desire. That means that's the only reason I find a person wants to remain a thought. You know, this is why we're still not mature as a civilization to acknowledge that, whoa, that person's emotions and preferences are evoking their identity in the moment. So we cannot be cruel. We cannot think people are their words, or we are in some sense hurting the innocent. This is why language is something where we have to be aware of it. It's like this box over every person's head and their whole childhood experience, whatever they've accumulated, whatever kind of handful of memories you have held in your being in this moment. It's a sign of the greatest warrior that only when he can put down the weapon, he can pick it back up. If the weapon is in your hand, the warrior gets frustrated. This is the balance of work and play. This is why it's so important in exploring the unconscious to be silly. I'm not joking, because language has freedom to move. It's more flexible when your eyes are closed. You can say your thoughts have greater speed when your eyes are closed, or the ratio of their change can maximize. I've had moments where I've sat down and I felt I sat still for like hours. And there's been moments where I sat down and whatever time passed, it just felt to me like I was from the beginning in one moment, as if not a single second had gone by, as if time was a mask upon the energetic reality of the presence of the world. And so, society is a masquerade. Civilization is a giant masquerade. And the masks are people's how they communicate themselves, or how they are seen in the light of communication of others. I'll never forget it. My father was talking to the mayor of this place in a couple hours away from Iran, Tehran. And we were there in the summer. And we go and see this kind of mayor. Right? It was the first time, and the mayor's office was very small, and it was a very simple kind of place. And we go in there, and the mayor was this guy with various certifications, like a PhD or something. He was a very intellectual guy, very smart guy. And so I remember me and my brother are quietly sitting there, and my father's kind of like talking to this man. And eventually, after their discussion and their whole dealings are done, My brother asks a question. It's like I didn't have a question at the time, but my brother had a great question. And my brother asks, he says, what do you think society needs? And that's because he was studying sociology. And he says, what does society need? And for a second, that was such an incredible question because the mayor just stopped being the mayor for a second. And he looked at me and my brother and he said, honesty. That's what's missing in society. It's missing not having the truth, but it's missing being true. And it is so important to attain, to find an honest world to live in. Because that's where true intelligence can be trusted. You have to establish a new relationship with your intelligence in the moment, in the sense that it is starting with one where you're not looking down on the self. Because I can tell you, the mind has such a potential. I've had my mind sometimes go into certain loops of chaotic self-interpretation. And it can do it endlessly. The mind has it's like once I made myself laugh in the middle of my kind of depressed self-talk that was occurring, like it happened for maybe 20 minutes it happened, where 20 minutes in the day I just got so sad and just so hopeless that I just stopped everything. It's as if I stopped the engine of my life pattern and I was just in this kind of meaninglessness, right? The mystic learns from silence with every interaction with it, learns from emptiness. Emptiness is, believe it or not, it's hilarious, but it's your spirit guide. It's a guidance, it's a remembrance. Ed, I'm going to just read your comment in case people can't see the chat. There is a talk of Oprah for president, Eckhart for VP. Let me tell you why I feel Eckhart Tolle will not be a good vice president, and he would not like it. How can I tell you? It's like there are certain people who wait for the logos to move first. They don't go to move the logos. Oprah more is a person I can see Oprah being a good vice president, but not a president. The president has to be, I find, a person who is honest with the world. And how can I tell you? It's the I find the greatest president is one where people can see his heart before his words. And a heart that's fearless. That's so crucial. Because it's such a huge responsibility. It's like being president is like sleeping at night. I've thought about it and I was like, wow, what great beings. It's maybe their egos are so solid that they don't realize the intensity of the moment. But imagine being the president of a nation, closing your eyes and going to bed. Imagine that moment where the president is putting his head on his pillow. And the president suddenly, before falling asleep, wonders about all the Americans in their beds right now. And wonders that what are they going to live for in tomorrow. And I'm telling you, society is weird. It's machine-like. Civilization, especially American society, the American spirit I find is like, like that Japanese show, it's the embodiment of Superman. It is the embodiment of Goku from the Dragon Ball Z series, that Japanese kind of show. So what it is it is an ability to engage, and as you efficiently engage, the greatest victory is a collective one. It's like how Lao Tzu said, once the leader's task is done, the people would say, we did it ourselves. Do you see? The president should not be obsessed with himself. His power does not come from the one's selfishness. It comes from one's selflessness. Because only when you're selfless you can truly see. And it's as if the president suddenly in the middle of the night wakes up realizing that every person has depended. It's as if they have trusted that position to lead. So what does that mean? That means it doesn't matter if the leader is good or bad. People are like, you better lead. Do you see? It's the hope for the world, because we all have so many personal storylines. Everybody's struggling so much that it's not struggling, but it's like we don't live in a world that's just pleasant 24/7. It's like pleasant experiences, unpleasant experiences, pleasant experiences, unpleasant experiences, right? And so those unpleasant experiences are the challenges of our days that in some sense we live for. Pretty much your life is probably based on some circumstance of maintenance, you know? So anyways, what I'm saying is, it's when you realize you are alive once. I am telling you, this world will become such a better place if for a second all the people, heads of the United Nations, just sat down and somebody came and said, hey guys, why are you in this room right now? And you'll kind of realize it's like, because you are alive once, you have only once to attempt the efficient greater vision. And that is it. If they tell me, like Mr. Within, what have you been doing your whole life? I can even narrow it to one thing. Endlessly marching. Just continuing. That's it. And moments you trust, nature guides you. Moments you don't trust, of course, nature's like, you don't care, why should I care for you? And then like, animalistic instincts devour you. We have to protect the mind also of the citizen. So what I feel is, imagine somehow, okay, here, I got it. This is the best way to kind of bring world peace, guys. We need to have a very adorable young kid, young, like the youth, a representation of the youth, go to the UN and playfully ask all the leaders of the UN to sit in like on the ground. Let's make people humble, They all sit on the ground and this kid does a guided meditation. In the guided meditation, this kid, imagine, is trying to show these world leaders that power has responsibility to instantly act. And the story we tell ourselves dictates the decisions that arise. This is why marketing is all about storytelling. What kind of story are you telling the world and what kind of aim? And you cannot tell a story until you paint a picture of the world. And the greater realization comes when the world is more than a picture. It's about maintaining your distance with language. You can say a lot of psychological issues that people find in modern society. It's because their attention is dwelling inside a story they feel they can't get out of. I've seen people like this when I was walking in downtown Toronto, and a part of me loves Canada, but a part of me are like, look at your streets. Look at the streets of your nation. And the streets of the nation is like, there are many defeated. There are many defeated people in the world, guys. The defeated and the successful are on the same streets, and that's the savageness of civilization. So the system which is providing resources must be treated as a son. When our civilization, imagine the child being born And the president reaching a state that the president trusts the citizens to such a degree that for the first time the citizens can govern too. I feel government should be the backup plan, and there should be a sort of no longer man, where it's like we're not voting people into position, we're trying to find the greatest ideas, and every person's contributing and drawing the same picture, drawing on one canvas. So what it is it's about the evolution of nations into the legendary collective vision of man. We have to realize we're one common species. We are also a natural being. That means just like how wolves know their territory, similarly man will get to, I'll make sure that every person gets to a point where they're also responsible, just like that wolf or that lion aware of its environment. Completely, man has to be also aware of his mind and inner realms. The greatest inspiration for the inner realms, it comes through moments where you trust the unknown and eventually build a relationship with knowledge that is not fixed. Think of it this way. Your experiences contain your beliefs. Or let me say it like this. Every experience is like a hand, that moment is like a hand sculpting the identity. So in writing, which is something I've written too much to not have anything to say about it. But it's a trust that there is a style, of course. I have to say this to anybody who writes. You have to treat it like a martial art. And you have to practice the moves for a long time. Now that practice can arise from your authentic curiosity, which is, I consider, the best approach. That means it's as if your own original intelligence teaches you, so you don't even need a mirror. External teachers and teachings are mirrors, they're reflections. My words, the way I'm saying them and how they are real to me, is in a total different sensitivity and texture compared to how different listeners hear it. Every day that I go to sleep, I feel tomorrow is my afterlife. And eventually one attains a sort of, I don't know if it's a Siddha, but I feel it's a sort of acquaintance. Imagine somebody who was a surfer, great surfer, who hadn't surfed for 10 years and suddenly forgot about how he was a surfer, and just his feet touch the water and suddenly memories come rushing in. Memories of how he rode the waves of the moment. And so it's that kind of feeling. It's so I won't give the idea that it's a power, but it's an acquaintance. It's a reacquaintance. It's a return, you know. Return to a rhythmic, kind of the eternal rhythms of the self. The moments where the self is too attributeless to die in space and time. This life is not meant to break our heart. Our hearts are meant to rebuild life. My brother would say an incredible sentence. He would say, "Fear nothing, love all." Very incredible words. And I realized those two words are the same moment. Fearlessly acknowledge the presence of the unknown. Honor it. Honor arises only through truth. You see, nobody can be an honorable person if they feel they have done something where it has been in the shadow of their conduct, in the shadows of their morality. That means we do have sort of filters and limits, and we have certain limits, just like how the body can take a certain amount of pressure, and then those limits begin activating the kind of hidden strength of the body, you know? And so it's like when we pass those limits are there to show us that if we go beyond it, there will be consequences. So it's that what I'm saying is to truly study the unconscious, you have to be a pilot. You have to realize you have to be able to walk alone before you can walk with the masses. Guys, I need a quick intermission. I'll be back. Okay, guys, I'm back. So I needed to get a glass of orange juice. I'm just trying to somehow share my experiences with how writing has kind of been a trust of my conscious mind of the unconscious, and then going into a sort of rhythmic abidance where it's as if before I wrote the words, I had seen the book written, I had seen the words there. You know, it's like sometimes I walk in nature and I see a vision of myself sitting in a certain part of the forest. You know, just certain image of myself, like, okay, I see, I can see myself sitting on that rock. So and then I go and sit on it. So it's as if like the mind projects a design, and because I have paid attention to the design, there's no longer fear, and then you just go forth. So it's as if the unconscious is also considering your strengths and weaknesses. Your it's as if there are deeper eyes to this world. The study of self will eventually lead to asking the question, what is the purpose of the soul? And that purpose has two positions it can be. It's either you can know it, and if you can know it, it's either an empty, you know it's empty, or it's endlessly infinite and full. Okay? So it's like an infinity void situation, but in the known, a sort of known emptiness, a sort of known infinity, and then there's also an unknown emptiness and an unknown infinity, right? And in order to attain that unknown infinity, that means it's like the being is being like, okay, it's not just like I'm thinking thoughts randomly. It's that I have my the intelligence is acknowledging the edge of exploration. And I've also used this metaphor where it's kind of like baking for me when I write something, or these talks have kind of transformed a little bit. But when I would write in a way where it was like when I was writing, I was not even I didn't even care about what words were coming out. You know, it was as if not that I didn't care. It's as if it was behind my eyes. There was a sort of emotional wave, and from that emotional wave, images were arising at a much more faster speed, and my hand and the pen had managed to catch that rhythm, right? So it was as if a sort of inner, it's like I'm experiencing a film, but through a very deep emotion behind my eyes, and the hands just picked up, just tuned in, kind of like just like how you intuitively look at objects and know the words for them. The hand instantly knows how to translate image. So when I had a relationship with my thought as if it's this moving landscape, it's like this film behind my eyes. So that film was being observed. The power of the observer is that it has access to all data, but it is not defined by it. That's the power of the observer. So when that is really truly comprehended experientially, then your relationship with knowledge and language is the new. It's automatically new. It's like the eyes that stopped trying to see and noticed they were the sight of the universal sector. Before me and you had names, we're just nature looking at itself, are we not? Even the kind of profound, there's a man named Swami Krishnananda. I'm very happy this man was alive. He advanced the metaphysical discussion on the Vedic sciences to a very vast level. But anyways, he had this quote where he said, religion is God remembering himself. And that is such a huge statement. That means man was never here, even to God. Kind of realizing it like there is no free will, but the universe is free to, like the whole universe is, the free will is through a kind of like a drop hitting an ocean, an integrative commonness of experience. Anyways, yeah, so like baking a cake, you're in a certain state, You have cared for the moment. The thoughts, the pen will find your hand when a thought is really, really important enough. That means you will truly don't go looking to write something. You'll get writer's block if you don't have the inspiration and you're also being dishonest, right? Sometimes it's strange that the honest humility of just acknowledging the simple gives an incredible ability to notice complex ways that the world can move. As Leonardo da Vinci says, simplicity is the most ultimate sophistication. And I'm like, hey man, that's not a simple sentence, you know? In upon this vast ocean of a changing world, our consciousness is a ship, it's a raft, it's a boat, it's a vehicle. And this vehicle has simulated an internal technology of language. So it's as if we are navigating two vehicles. The truth is not that it's just purely singular or it's purely void. The truth is that anything can be true. I'm not joking. Anything can be true. When you reach the edge of what you know and you realize the exploration's revelation is the justifier. That means there are certain problems that their answers won't arise until it's the future. For example, Fermat's last theorem. You know, this mathematician had this kind of complex problem, and years later, many years later, you know, a man by, I believe his name was Andrew Wales, or Wiles, or Wales. I think it was Andrew Wales. But anyways, this man solves this kind of millennium question. The millennium questions, you get $1,000,000 if you can solve them. So anyone, any you know, kids listening, go solve these problems and you get $1,000,000. You know, these complex mathematical proofs. You know, and mathematics is a language, by the way. So only those who speak the language can penetrate the secrets of the proof. But anyways, so what happens is that Fermat's last theorem, it's like it doesn't. Fermat told people, "Yo, man, I have a proof for this," but he died, you know, and he died, and people never knew what happened. And so Andrew Wiles, oh God, I don't know, Andrew Wales, I think, Andrew W. Andrew solves this problem. And people come and tell him, do you think Fermat could solve it? Do you believe Fermat? And Andrew says that it was only through a new branch of mathematics that had developed after Fermat's time that he found a way to come with that outcome. So Andrew was saying like, no, there's no way Fermat could have solved this. Now, Fermat could have solved this to himself. But I feel you can attain the outcome. You know, it's as if like you cannot have someone create a work of art and not have any inclination of how that work of art will end. So I feel Fermat could have known. But he could have known at least the direction of its solution, not perhaps the solution. So anyways, there was a kind of leap in knowledge, and then suddenly we could have a solution to that problem. So we have to pay attention to the problems, and we have to choose as a civilization where our attention is going on. You know, just like how birds move together, wolves run together, it's the same thing with human species. We are minds that have to communicate together. And that communicator, the more rhythmic, compassionate, and universally advancing it becomes, It's as if it's kind of like it's a very cool moment where man returns to nature to realize he never was outside of it. You are the presence of the natural world. And the natural world is connected and leads to the values of the inner world. That means we had to have a body, or we could not have an individual relationship. We could not even acknowledge the unconscious. That means it's I guess, to be honest, it's like opening your eyes on an island and trying to use whatever is accessible and around you for a survival of the narrative of the character in the story and the continuity of the subjective self. The subjective self is so emotionally changed. That means people don't realize how much their emotions are changing their discipline, are changing their actions and plans and intent. And in some strange way, if you want to be very successful in this society, the more like a robot you are, endlessly like a robot that is like has an eternal power source, it's like the more robotic you are, the more you are celebrated, only to realize you're a gear of a cog of a sinking ship. So it's like we have to acknowledge this ship that we're on, 8 billion of us, and we have to, some people have to care for the holes that is causing the ship to sink. And we have to begin rebuilding, reinventing a totally new value and simulated value of the world. That means my experiences are simulating the world into a narrative right now. So this is the cool thing. I find the greatest thing that civilization could be an environment of resources where everyone in their own freedom, and if society gets to matures to such an honest degree, then it becomes like people stop fighting and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's find a way, just like how inventors think. This is how I know somebody is a true inventor. When if you ask them what's the greatest invention, and they'll say an invention that endlessly builds inventions. And so we have, in some sense, the global stage. The global stage is that invention that will build endless inventions. So what that means is the unleashing of genius upon the surface of this earth. Everybody, every living person, their mind is literally kind of like you haven't put the key in the engine. You don't trust the moment to drive it. When you trust and drive it, it gets momentum. Purpose occurs through the greater actions that occur. It's like the more you act, the more life is moving, changing for you. Adopting a new creative attitude with the moment by realizing that if you give freedom, like this is a very important ability. You have to give freedom to the world. Freedom means respecting not just the objective space of the being, but also the subjective space of the being. That means external actions are like explosions where the debris is falling in the person's inner reality. Certain emotions arise where the creature's data processing power either is able to hold or it's not. Anytime a system fails, there's either a continuing factor or that failure is recycled into a success later on. Right? So what that means is the experience, every experience really has a value. It's not like you can experience something that is valueless, you know? Sometimes I've, to be honest, I've kind of very rarely doubted myself in continuing these talks, but there has been moments where a sort of wonder for the impact of an echo. If you notice, the echo becomes fainter, you know, as it travels longer. Trust nature we must. There is no other balance. So on some level, it's as if like for the person's any sort of ego will suddenly discover its limits. When you realize your limits, that's the only way true honor arises. We should wash the eyes of the species with a new efficient vision that will have legendary mythological implications as a narrative. It's like we're not just trying to, it's like we are trying to find the true story of life, you know? And there's something unique that when I write, I don't give limitations to the writing. I observe just how much the energy levels are willing to continue. And every time I've written something and I've come to edit it afterwards, it's as if it's been totally a different state. That means when the writer writes the words, that moment is sacred. But when the writer reads the word, that is the interpretation of, the effect of that writing, you know? That means beautifully, no one has ever seen the artist's true art like the artist has. I find that to be a wonderful statement. That means there is a sacred solitude, a sort of advantage to your loneliness that your eyes see what they see. When your sight becomes a source of strength, you want to live in a world where there are no weaknesses. So for me, it's as if like the person who reaches the top of the mountain, usually what they do afterwards is they try to pave a way, to pave a trail. Now the thing is, the person eventually climbs down because once you reach that state, you get a full, from the top of the mountain, a full view of the city and the position. Right? Sometimes enlightenment is not about reaching some heaven and being in heaven all the time. It's about just in that moment seeing what is required to be seen. And once that acknowledgement is there by your presence, your personality is kind of free, I find. The same trust you had before you learned language as a child, if you return to that trust, the mind will look at the language simulation, the program of language, and it will notice the language threshold, and it will realize language there's a user of technology to language. The user of technology can instantly step out of the technology. Remembrance of the presence of the moment prior to the personality, in which from that space, that's the best way I can say, from that atmosphere arises the true self. You, it's as if like if you don't trust the world, you're not in the world. You're in your subjective realm. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. There's something I've put in the description. I've kind of noticed that the chat section of this is inefficient. I made this Facebook group called School of Athens 2.0. I've put the link in the description. That's a place where it might be very easier to have dialogue and kind of the School of Athens vibe, where I want to see kind of various philosophical visions upon the next generations. Like it's so anyways, join that Facebook group, and it's easier for me to also communicate. So thanks guys, much blessings, and namaste. Mankind 2.0 will have an awareness to a subjective realm in which the future generations will open their eyes with a strange freedom. Thanks for tuning in, guys.